Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Ashen Hall playing as the Empire against the forces of Clan Angrand. So get ready for a bit of a drawn out slugfest, because that is kind of what these matches tend to degenerate into. Now, I wanted to try something a little new this time. Whenever I go against Dwarves, there's a few kind of go-to builds I have. Mass Greatsword with some cavalry and handgun support, Hellstorms sometimes when I'm in the mood, masses of handguns and outriders. All of them can be viable, all of them can work, but I wanted to try something different. I've kind of been messing around with mortars. I wanted to see if we can make mortars work against the Dwarves. Now certainly mortars do not have good AP values. If we look at their numbers here, 134 missile damage, they've only got 16 AP explosive damage. That said, decent radius, reasonably good accuracy with chevrons. We haven't really gotten that many chevrons in here, which might be a bit of a mistake, but definitely these guys should have okay accuracy. And I kind of hope that against rangers, against slayers, and otherwise against units I debuff with Plague of Rust, these guys should be king. Now, Soap, I brought 3 mortars. Ashen Hall is a bit ideal for this, because with Ashen Hall you have these huge protrusions in the on the map, which really deny direct fire weapons. So one of the things Dwarves often will do to you is shut your artillery down with counter battery fire from say cannons or bolt throwers, units like that. But on the map like this, your mortars can be relatively safe and secure behind say a ridge or a crest like this, and you can then kind of get unimpeded fire. Now for the rest of my army, I went with a pretty conventional comp. Frontline mix of swordsmen and greatswords. You can see we've got Sigmar Sons and double swordsmen here. 2 greatswords over here in the woods. I didn't want my greatswords taking a pounding before the match started, so we got 2 greatswords there, then 2 more greatswords here on the flank, so a bit scattered. And finally we do have 2 handguns to act as the anti-gyro force. Actually that's not them. Dead handguns over there. Balthazar Gelt is in here for his Plague of Rust as well as for the Final Transmutation. And I figured, you know, we might need it, especially because Clan Angrand does have the Ancestors, so I wanted to be ready for those. For my opponent, he did not bring the Ancestors. He was trying to pull ye old switcheroo on me, and decided to go with a bit of an interesting build. If we look at it, he went super cheap on his Lord choices. He's got a Rune Lord who doesn't even have a Rune of Wrath and Ruin. That's like the cheapest thing you'll ever do, but this is even cheaper. This is cheaper than cheap. This is literally just a stock Rune Lord with nothing. So he went super cheap. He's got a Thane backing up, which is an interesting choice. But then it's just a mass of infantry. We've got miners with blasting charges, vanilla miners, dwarf warriors with great weapons. It's just this kind of staggered formation, full circle, full box. They are backed by some artillery. He's got bolt thrower for probably anti-cavalry and anti-artillery purposes, a cannon as well for that counter battery, and a Goblobber, which is another great anti-arty piece. Though I do hope that even the Goblobber has some flatter arc than a mortar, so I kind of hope that if I get into good position, we'll be able to avoid its fire. My opponent also does have some Rangers here in reserve, the Ulthar's Raiders. Just a massive, and the Dragonback Slayers here, so just a massive, super wide comp. You try to bust in here, you're going to be taking a crossfire from everything. There's just so many thunders, so much nastiness here. But regardless, the early game is a bit of posturing. I do try to get a few shots off with the mortar. You can see some of the shots there are arcing in from the cannon and the bolt thrower. The cannon's just barely able to sort of arc over the crest there. And so I'm immediately going to start moving my mortar. I don't want my mortars taking a pounding. You can see a few shots that go off there. Going after, I do believe it was the miners with blasting charges. I don't entirely remember. You can see there they are. And I'd been expecting my opponent to deploy somewhere around here. Not entirely sure why, to be honest. In retrospect, it wouldn't really have made sense. But that's why my mortars were kind of spread out over there, but now suddenly we are flexing as quickly as we can, trying to get here behind the berm and start teeing off on my opponent's army. Now, in the meantime, we are taking some withering artillery fire. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that. You can see the bolt throwers pushing up, going to start firing as well, and this early game is definitely going to be a bit of posturing, so I'm actually going to fast forward through it because there just isn't much going on. Unfortunately, some collateral damage there going in on the greatswords and actually takes out 11 of them, so that's really not good for me. That's really pretty darn unfortunate. But you know, it's posturing, and finally some of our mortars are starting to come online. So you can see the connection there going in on the miners. You know, single connection, miners down 500 HP, and do keep in mind that's an 80 armor unit. So the mortar definitely getting some value, and we are slowly but surely sort of shelling away at these filthy stunties. Unfortunately, though, our mortars are in a bit of a crossfire. You can see we actually lose a mortar here to that artillery, which is really unfortunate. One of our guns offline already, and we've barely done any damage. But you know, our mortars, they're firing, they're doing their best. You can see here we're going to start working on the Ikran miners. We do try to hit them with a Plague of Rust, trying to debuff that armor protection for our mortars to have an easier time of it. And you can see Barfazar there running for dear life, trying to juke these cannonballs and the bolt thrower shots and all that sort of stuff. You can do that pretty effectively if you're on top of your micro, but because I'm also trying to get my artillery around and trying to be on the lookout for counter battery fire. It's not entirely working out. My opponent here does start pushing forward. You can see another shot whiffing and hitting the Thunderers. That's another like 500 damage. The mortar's definitely doing some decent work there, even on the misses. Though unfortunately, the slow projectile speed definitely kind of letting them down here a little bit. Had this range against the Ekron Miners. There we go, a nice meaty connection. Another 700 damage, 400 damage basically. We've already taken them down by about 1,000 HP. So good stuff from the mortars, just raining death and destruction down on the stunties. And now it's time for the Thunders. You can see, unfortunately, they're unloading on Balthazar, and I have no healing, so that's going to be a bit of an issue. But my opponent is kind of using up his artillery ammo, trying to counter battery my mortars. Not really having the greatest success, so he's going to be able to rat off this mortar crew over here because it is a little bit exposed, so it's taking fire from the Goblobber. But you can see the Thunderers here just taking an absolute beating, and the mortar's really not giving him a moment's rest. That said, Balthazar is forced off, but you can see my opponent here kind of overextending, a bit of a lapse in micro, and that is going to open up the opportunity for me to push out. He doesn't know I've got these great swords over here, or he didn't realize, he wasn't paying attention, or I'm not entirely sure why or how he missed them, but the great swords are there, and now they're pushing out. You can see Thunder is still under fire, and out comes the force. You can see the swordsman leading the way, and suddenly we're going to start breaking cover. You can see the great swords over here are going to start breaking cover. Unfortunately, I do forget about my handguns, but we're going to start making a massive push while my opponent's got these troops exposed out here. These Thunderers out in the open, he's got these Miners out in the open. We're going to be able to jump the Ekron Miners before they get their blasting charges off, which is huge. We deny them that extra burst of damage, which is really something you always want to get done. And they're Ekron Miners, so they don't have the best melee stats, to be honest. They do get a few satchel charges off there, but really it's not going to be much. Our Swordsmen are shivering up. And Swordsmen are one of those units that have actually pretty darn stellar stats. It's one of those things people don't realize about Swordsmen, I think, because they're very squishy. They're obviously Imperial State troops, so they're very squishy. They're very flimsy. They don't have much going for them HP wise or armor wise, but they do have stellar melee stats. 32 baseline, I do believe, and up here we're up to 37, 35, which is crazy for a unit that caught, like with this chevrons, they were like 450. Over here in the meantime, we were pounding these Thunderers, just trying to shell them into oblivion. You can see the great swords here launching their push, trying to close the gap. In the meantime, these great swords are hitting these Ekron Miners, blasting charges, and we are starting to get some shutdowns. You can see this bolt thrower with shorter range, forced to push up a little more. We are going to be able to snare it there with the Sigmar Sons. My opponent didn't know where any of my troops were, so suddenly he's being swarmed all over the place, and he's a bit out of position. And Dwarves, of course, not the most flexible forces. Now, certainly he's whittling down Balthazar, and I'm just not able to really keep Balthazar alive effectively. It's very difficult for me. Balthazar's spells, not the greatest range. I'm trying to get a final transmutation off, but it's not happening. That said, Ekron's Miners, they lost their frenzy, they're surrounded, they're getting beaten down by swordsmen on one end, angry greatswords on the other. They're not going to last much longer. Over here, the Sigmar Sons swamping the bolt thrower crew, which is trying to push around. I'm not entirely sure what my opponent was doing there. Perhaps, once again, a bit of a lapse of micro. Greatswords over here getting in on the cannon crew. They're going to be able to start working them down as well. Just hacking and slashing, unfortunately just taking a withering pounding from the Thunders, Ulthar's Raiders, Rangers. We don't even get a mark by Ulthar on us, and these greatswords are screwed. In come these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, and that is going to be GG for these greatswords. But you know, they bogged down the cannon for a little bit. They bought us some time. And the mortars are once again unloading. The mortars are continuously firing. The Ekron's Miners, they're broken. These Miners over here do get their satchel charges off, but you know, they're out in the open. We're going to be able to start surrounding and beating them down, and the Imperial push just keeps going. I finally do remember that I have handguns on the field and start pushing them out as well. And you can see over here, we've overrun these Miners. I let the swordsmen pursue because they're faster, and then let the greatswords push through, trying to flex into the back line. Elsewhere, in the meantime, you can see the Thunder Handgunners pushing up. The mortars continue pounding away. We've got all our guns back online, and you know, they're doing some work. They're doing some decent work. These guys, well, nah, I lied. It's not all of them are doing decent work, but some are getting some decent damage in there. It's a little difficult. Over here, we're going to get into these Miners. Unfortunately, the Dwarf Warriors just overrun the great swords, and they got completely smushed. There's not much to say there. And unfortunately, the Ulthar's Raiders, you're just able to kind of push through that mortar storm. Perhaps I didn't have enough chevrons on the mortars to really have them in the accuracy I needed. I don't entirely know. You can see the Thunders, or the handguns there, are going to unload on the Ulthar's Raiders, though, dropping a few models and forcing them off a little bit. One of the good benefits of handguns is, of course, they at least outrange the Rangers. And over here, the Sigmar Sons, unbreakable, stalwart defenders of the Empire, just pushing through constantly. They're not a great unit against Dwarves. They don't have AP. They don't have the best armor, but you know, they're pushing through. They're unbreakable. That's what really counts here, and we're able to get on the Thunders. We're able to get on these Rangers, and we're able to start shutting down this firepower that's been a bane of my existence this entire game. Elsewhere, Dwarf Warriors are getting mulched by great swords. Really, I kind of wish I brought a different. I really did wish at this point that I kind of brought a different lore, but what can you do? Hindsight's 2020. The Dwarf Warriors here are going to get destroyed by the swordsmen, and and the great swords had been helping there for a little bit, but at this point we're just going to leave it to the swordsmen, who will be able to win this out with their better stats, despite some artillery coming in. And now we're trying to push into these Dragonback Slayers. My opponent is starting to run out of reserves at this point. We've kind of been pulling his reserves into this fight constantly. He does get rid of my greatswords here. We in turn push off the Ulthar's Raiders. Over here, these Dwarf Warriors are pushing in against my handgunners. You can see are pulling those pro Space Marines or pro Marine splits straight out of StarCraft, and trying to get these Dwarf Warriors off of them. And you can see we're going to be able to just open up from the flank. Dwarf Warriors, of course, have no shields. The Great Weapon variant has no shields. We push in with the Swordsmen, and these guys are now wrapped and they're trapped. In the meantime, if we look elsewhere, you can see the Great Swords over here have busted through the Dwarf Warrior line. Now they're at the top of the Thunderers, just beating them down. My opponent doesn't have any Runes of Wrath and Ruin or any buffs to keep his troops in line. I didn't even realize this at the time because I didn't check, but that's been a huge benefit for me. Unfortunately, the Great Swords you're fighting against, the Dragonback Slayers, are going to be pushed into by these Dwarf Warriors. And really, in retrospect, I would have been better bringing out Transmutation of Lead in this game rather than Final Transmutation. In this sort of situation, Transmutation of Lead would have been huge. My opponent here is going to be able to set up a beautiful charge, come in from the flank, and he's going to be able to do a lot of damage to these great swords. That said, though, you can see the mortar fire continuously coming in. The Sigmar's Sons hacking and slashing through these Rangers. We are trying to take this cannon offline, but it's just not working. Balthazar, he is going to snap and run, and he's going to run right off the field. The cannon is still not offline, and I didn't realize these great swords were not fighting. They're literally just sitting here, twiddling their thumbs, while the Sigmar's Sons are fighting and dying for the cause. So, definitely a little unfortunate. We finally do get on the cannon crew, but too little too late, really. Balthazar has been routed, and yeah, things are looking a little grim. The Thane over here does take a few volleys from the handguns. You can see are in full flight, trying to escape him. Over here, I am trying to get these swordsmen into the fray to save our great swords, who are getting overrun by the Slayers. Dragonback Slayers, not a bad unit against infantry in the mid-tier, like great swords. They can definitely perform. But you can see the swordsmen here coming in from behind. And if we take an overarching look of the battlefield, balance of power is starting to swing heavily in my favor, but my opponent still does have some tools. He's still got these Thunders, he's still got some Rangers. You can see we're trying to pound some of these guys over here, the Ulthar's Raiders and units like that, who just shattered my great swords. You can actually see the Ulthar's Raiders, they're taking some meaty connections, and we're actually going to take our mortar crew that's out of ammo and chase these Dwarf Warriors off the map. But unfortunately, you can see my handguns. So a lot of this balance of power is probably due to my handguns, who are still around kicking, which is great. They are still around kicking. But they're running for dear life from a Thane. So it's a bit of an inflated balance of power, I think, because I've got very few units left on the field that are intact. The great swords and the two handguns, of which one is currently being run down by a Thane. The other is about to be engaged by Dragonback Slayers. And even though there's only 17 of these buggers left, they are still going to be a major threat to the handguns. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure why these clowns are advancing here. These Dragonback Slayers were more than in range. You can see another withering volley coming in, just melting these guys. But still, there's 12 Slayers. 500 HP, no problem. Let's go. They're going to tear through these handguns, no problemo. So they're going in, and you can see, balance of power shifting back towards the middle. My opponent still does have some tools on the battlefield. You can see the Rune Lord here chasing off these great swords. This health unit of great swords, though, there's still some hope. So as these handguns run for dear life from the Thane, as our swordsmen here get crushed in the long grind by Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, things are starting to look a little grim once more. The Dragonback Slayers here are able to get into the handguns. I wasn't able to shoot them down at all. And once they're in melee, the handgun's terrible melee stats just really letting them down. And they're not really able to do much. You can see the mortar still wailing on these miners, trying to get some value, but it's not happening. The mortars, now it's actually got its own arc interrupted, so it's not able to fire. And I'm realizing that I'm in some deep, deep trouble. So I'm actually going to run away with the handguns. Now, not ideal, because Dragonback Slayers do have that power of the Dragonback, the slow. But I figure, you know what, screw this. I need to get out of dodge. We need to escape with these handguns. If I don't keep them alive, I lose this game. So the great swords are coming down. They are coming down for the people, and they are going to be cleaving some Dragonback Slayers in what is probably one of the most anticlimactic charges ever. And they do get a few connections there. They do cut one of them down. You can see he's just dying there. But a Marked by Ulthar does go down on these guys. I'm going to drop all of their stats a whole bunch, and these great swords basically insta-rout. But they bought a few precious seconds for the handguns to fight their way clear and to keep running like hell, which is basically the theme of the game. So in the meantime, we are using our superior mobility to run down some enemy troops. You can see we chase these Thunders off the map. Over here, our artillery crew chases a super healthy unit of Dwarf Warriors. Well, by this game's standards, super healthy unit of Dwarf Warriors off the map. And that's going to be a huge boon now. can see these Great Swords over here trying to intercept these Dwarf Warriors who are in turn trying to intercept my handguns. The handguns stop to take a shot. They've opened up on the Rangers, melt a few models off of them, and then immediately keep running. Just keep running, guys. The two of them dead here to the Thane and his angry administrations. A few of them do get caught out there by the Dwarf Warriors, but if I can keep this unit alive, we will be able to, I think, win the game. Over here, the Ulthar Raiders are trying to catch our handguns who still have over half their ammo, but we are actually going to be able to come in here with the Great Swords, this super healthy unit, and they're going to bog down the Rune Lord, they're going to bog down Ulthar's Raiders, and they're going to start winning this fight, because of course they're just so healthy. This unit's barely been touched. They're sitting at almost 100 HP, and that was one of those the advantages of this sort of swarm tactic. That certainly some of my Great Swords basically got annihilated, but some are still around kicking, and they are now in with a vengeance. Over here, the Dragon Max Slayers are trying to move around on the last two models on 11 HP, running amok, but now they're under the scrutiny of the handguns, and they are having some very, very bad time. We're going to watch this, how this volley comes in. You can see just scything through these guys, and there we go. That was such a brutal shot that it took off his arm. It's pretty crazy. In the meantime, though, the Thane simply ignores my Great Swords and keeps running. So you can see the handguns run for dear life while the Thane's running from the Great Swords. My mortar, though, does finally run out of ammo, so we're going to charge the crew into the Thane. At this point, there's a little bit of Benny Hill action as the Rune Lord here gets beaten down. As our artillery crew finally chases off my opponent's remaining troops. You can see a volley there from the handguns, not really doing much. Thane's small, he's got a shield. You're not going to get much done there. But my opponent's troop count at this point is very low, and honestly, very few of these troops at this point are really a relevant presence on the battlefield. There's just very, very little left. The Rune Lord's getting taken offline. I think a huge chunk of these so-called enemy troops on the field is simply from that big unit of Dwarf Warriors over there that's running through the trees. We're going to try and intercept the Thane here with our artillery crew, because, you know, that's what artillery crewmen do. They beat down Thanes. They actually land a hit there, doing a grand total of 5 damage, which is pretty amazing. And then another 8 by the look of it. So, yeah, this Thane, he's scared, and you can see the Thane is absolutely terrified of the mortar crew, who's got their toothpicks out, and they're after him. They're going to show him who's boss. So my opponent does start withdrawing with his Thane, and now, as he turns around, we're going to deliver a very unchivalrous volley to his posterior, which is going to make him very sad. And at this point, the Thane decides it might be time to go home and sleep this one off. So, a game that swung to Empire. Now, this is a tough matchup for Empire if you don't run with a handful of sort of gimmicky builds. But the mortars kind of failed here, I won't lie. I wanted to try them out, and I think it's always good to try new strategies out and try new builds out. But in retrospect, honestly, this was like 2,500 gold worth of mortars. Basically anything else would have done me better. Doubled handguns. I could have actually had like 4 handguns for the price of these mortars. Yeah, having 6 handguns on the field on top of 6 great swords would have been huge. Yeah, there's not much. There's nothing else to say there. Having 6 handguns and 6 great swords, and then this sword line, which probably won the battle much more handily, because I could have just pushed in, swamped his fire with my own fire, and crushed his infantry underfoot with my great sword. So that was whatever, but it was worth a try. The mortars, you know, they're an interesting unit. I do think that perhaps I should have chevron them up a little more, got a little more accuracy out of them. Maybe not chevron up the swordsmen, but you know, the swordsmen got 100 kills, so who am I to say? For my opponent's build, I don't think it's bad. It's a very all-over-the-place build. There's a lot of units that are, like, it's very haphazard. Obviously, he threw some chevrons into to a handful of spots where he had some points left over. By the look of it, just had a point left over for Dwarf Warriors and some miners. But the Thunder is not a bad pick. The Ulthar's Raider is great in this matchup. In my opinion, this Artillery Park, not bad either. The Dwarf Warriors, I personally prefer Longbeards in this matchup. I don't know. Longbeards hold out better. The other thing I would say is a bit of a mistake is this backline. On an enclosed map like this one, where there's a very good chance your opponent can get artillery into your backline, it's not very hard to get or cavalry into your backline on Ashen Hall, because there's all these trees, there's all these interruptions. Those same line of sight blockers that screw over artillery pieces are helping that cavalry close the distance. So this cannon, for example, might have been completely useless. If I brought a bunch of Rice Guard, I could have probably swung around the flanks, collapsed on the back line. Once again, these 3 mortars were basically the value of 2 Reichsguard. So had I had 2 Reichsguard, that could have also been huge. They could have plowed into the back line. They could have really disrupted these guys. All my opponent had were the Dragon Max Slayers, who are good at killing large, but it's only one unit, and he wouldn't really be able to control the troops there. So I think a Rune of Wrath and Rune would have been good on the Rune Lord, a good choice, in my humble opinion there. But otherwise, pretty solid build. Interesting take going super wide. I would probably dump the Thane and gotten Rune of Wrath and Rune there, even if no other runes, just for the control, and maybe bump these Dwarf. Maybe get extra unit of Slayers. I don't know. Try to cram something in. Maybe one more unit of Slayers. I don't know if that would be possible if you dump the Thane. Maybe you'd have to finagle some stats somewhere, but getting a little bit more anti-large, a little more point defense anti-large would have been good, I think. But regardless, good game to It's Me, Mike, Ike. I had a lot of fun. It was fun testing the strat out. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and perhaps a little, informative. Now you don't know how to use great swords against dwarves, or not to use mortars against dwarves. But if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any thoughts, opinions, comments, be sure to leave them down below. I'll respond as soon as I can. I do appreciate you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.